war against women definitely cost Republicans the election the last time around. However, they did win the war on women in some regard. And Laura Bassett from Huffington Post put together a really, really great piece where she profiles all of the different ways that Republicans won this war against women. Now, back in 2010 is when they really launched this aggressive assault. And ever since then, about 54 abortion clinics shut down because of restrictive anti-abortion legislation. So just to give you guys some more information, at least 54 abortion providers across 27 states have shut down or ended their abortion services. Now, the vast majority of the states in the country actually do not keep track of the number of abortion clinics they have because they count them as hospitals or the same as hospitals. They don't have a special category for abortion clinics. But Laura Bassett and the people who researched for this story looked specifically at abortion centers and abortion clinics, and they found that about 54 of them shut down as a result of this restrictive legislation.
And then it wasn't just the ones that shut down. I mean, first of all, like in states like Texas, they were devastated.
Yes.
9 clinics shut down in Texas. And then you have states like Arizona where enough clinics shut down that in order for some people in the state around Lake Havasu, for example, they have to drive 150 miles out of their way, either to Phoenix or to Las Vegas in some parts of the state. So that's another huge impediment. And these are all ways to limit your legal right to an abortion, which you have because of a Supreme Court decision, but they don't really care about that. They want to take away those reproductive rights.
Yeah.
And then furthermore, there's another good point made, which is that if you're rich or you can take time off from work, other different factors, you got a good car, it's easier. What if you don't have a car and you got to go 150 miles? You can't take any time off from work. You're working for a living. You're working 2 jobs.
Yes.
Well, then you've got a stratification again, where the rich have access to those rights, and the middle class in some instances, but the poor don't.
And think about the ramifications of that, because if wealthier people have access to abortions, if they can deal with the 24-hour or in some cases 72-hour waiting period between the consultation and the actual abortion, if they can drive 150 miles out of town to an abortion clinic, then they don't have to worry about the financial responsibility of having a child. But if it impacts poorer people disproportionately, I mean, it's going to be a complete and utter disaster for that child that is born into a poor family. It's going to be really, really difficult for that family to take care of that kid. And on top of it, these so-called pro-life advocates and legislators are the very first people in line that want to cut social services that help these poor families raise these kids. In fact, I want to really quickly jump ahead to something that I found really, really interesting. When you look at the cost of childcare in the country, just childcare, I'm not even talking about college education, I'm not talking about food and clothing to take care of the kid or housing, I'm talking about what you need to make sure that you have someone to watch over your kid while you go to work. I mean, the cost is astronomical. In fact, in 35 states and DC, the cost of center-based daycare, let alone a nanny, is higher than the cost of a year at a public college. Okay, so why aren't Republicans up in arms about that? The cost of, childcare. If they're really so pro-life, why don't they want to do something to make sure that people are able to go to work and afford childcare? Why don't they want to make sure that, we keep the food stamp program, that we keep programs that help, like WIC, for instance, programs that help poor families feed their children?
Okay, I have a couple points to make about what you said in this story. Mm-hmm. So on that story about childcare costs, in 28 states, if you got 2 kids, the cost of childcare is more than if you work a minimum wage job for 40 hours a week. So if you're making minimum wage, sad day, you literally can't even afford your childcare. So you lose money by going to work. Think about how insane that is. And then we just throw bootstraps at people. Now, when you come to the abortion story, you know what they call these laws that they're passing? They're called TRAP laws, Targeted Regulation of Abortion Providers. So the guys who say, we're not doing a war on women, I don't know what you're talking about. They named the laws TRAP. Like, ha-ha, we got you. We took away your rights.
Yep.
And what do you mean war on women? And then the double irony is, the guys who hate regulation, their main weapon is regulation. So they change, for example, they say, now you got to have the same exact specs as a hospital, which are nearly impossible for these smaller clinics. sorry,
Yeah.
we regulated you out of existence. How is that for ironic for Republicans?
That's exactly what they do, and I always go back to this. It's never about being pro-life, or maybe in few instances you're deeply religious and you do believe that it's life at the moment of conception. But I think that for most conservative legislators, it's about control and it's about punishment. Haha, you were having sex when you weren't trying to reproduce, therefore you should be punished if you get pregnant. And also, let's keep it real, a lot of male conservative Republicans are not in favor of women leaving the house, working, having financial independence, financial responsibilities of their own. And so this is a way to control you. Obviously, you don't have the ability to be as successful as you can be in your career if you can't, have real family planning as an option.
And the last thing I would add to that is, look, if this was within, it's just the context of these laws, you might say, look, maybe you guys are being unfair because they're just pro-life and they're just doing everything they can to save what they view to be lives. But within the context of other things that the Republicans are doing at the same time, trying to make sure that they're against laws that would say that women have to get paid the same amount as men, or if they don't and they could prove it in a court of law, then they should win a settlement for that. They say, no. We don't want you to win that settlement. We don't want you to bring those cases. We don't want you to get the same amount of pay for the same job as a man. Well, and then you add about 12 other things that they've done that we've covered on the show that are targeted specifically at women, and then you get a clearer picture that Anna's right. This is not just like, a deeply held religious belief on one particular issue. All of these are aimed at making sure that they could reassert their power over women.